Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Delphi Forum and welcome to our conversation with Mr. Antony Cook, CVP Deputy General Counsel, Microsoft USA, and Mr. Daskalakis, MIT professor, but also the head of the committee, the leader of the Committee for Artificial Intelligence announced by the Greek government. First of all, I totally agree with our panel title, Tech for the People, because we tend to forget it, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. The ongoing conversation is full, the past years has been full of insecurities, theories, the sense of guilt, and probably we stand in awe facing all these challenges at present and in the future. So, I feel privileged having this conversation with you two, and starting from Mr. Cook. We use AI in our daily lives in order to fulfill simple tasks, to save time and energy. However, what is even more important is to examine how AI helps people handle more complicated issues. For instance, people's well-being, health, cultural matters, and of course, natural disasters. So, can you give us specific examples?
Sure. Well, firstly, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And it is a time, I think, where we look at the technology not just as to how it can solve day-to-day tasks, but where it can really be used. And what we see with generative AI in particular, the latest iteration of the technology, is the opportunity for it to really solve some of the more difficult problems and to help us across the social spectrum in terms of some of the societal issues. And so I think we've had the use of the technology under the way in which we think about it as AI for good. How is AI going to benefit not just business, but how is it going to benefit society as a whole? And in that context, we feel very excited. And then you look at some of the applications of that, to your question, to be very specific. You can look at it, for example, in Greece, some of the things we've done around cultural heritage, where you use the technology as we have for the Olympia project to preserve the technology, preserve the history, and to bring alive the history in different ways. You look at it, and we've worked with the Greek government here for natural disasters. The recent fires, we provided mapping ability to use AI to be able to identify where the fires were going, what are some of the fire patterns and the ways in which, therefore, preventative approaches could be taken. And if I take my role and I look more broadly across some of the other societal issues that we're focused on, is using the technology to address areas where there's very, very high amounts of data that you want to be able to synthesize and make decisions about. And so on things like biodiversity, where we have programs in the Amazon area to really look at how the technology can be used to preserve and assist farmers in the way in which they are farming around the Amazon to protect biodiversity. So they're just a few examples, but I think it's a very exciting time to see the way that technology can be applied in all these different fields to really advance the social interest as much as the pure business interest.
Mm-hmm. In your capacity, Mr. Daskalakis, as the head of the committee, which would it be the main aim of the AI strategic policy in Greece?
Right, so we're looking at many aspects of how to create a strategy for the country, understanding, obviously the needs as well as the competitive advantages of the country. So we're looking at applications in the public sector, obviously. We're looking at human capital development. We're looking at the ethical code that's going to govern the deployment of this tech. We're looking at how to create a friendly environment for business development in this space. So we're taking a holistic approach, of course, being realistic, and exploiting what we think are competitive advantages that we may have, both in terms of, for example, the amazing Greek diaspora in this space, as well as the fact that Greece wants to leapfrog, and for various historical reasons, we haven't adapted yet, but that can actually be an advantage because we don't have legacy systems that we need to fight against. So we can design our strategy in this space in a way that we can optimize for the current conditions. For example, an interesting domain there is aggregating data, harmonizing it across various sectors, and thinking progressively about protecting privacy, as well as getting utility out of this data. We think that having a good data governance design in place can actually help boost the ecosystem in this space.
Mr. Cook, AI provides citizens, and by extent voters, the ability to recognize disinformation, therefore providing a safety net regarding democracy. We should not forget the two forthcoming elections in the European Union and the US. So can you give us, again, specific examples about how can voters be protected from a malicious AI-driven system?
It's a great question because this year, more than 4 billion people around the world are going to go to elections. And so, one of the things that we have thought about a lot is the impact that deepfakes in particular, and particularly in video and audio, where there is the opportunity for the technology to be used in ways which could create distortions and misrepresentations. And so one of the things that we did, and we actually launched it at the Munich Security Accord in the February timeframe, was we worked with a number of other tech companies because this isn't something that Microsoft will solve itself. And we worked with a number of other tech companies to launch what we call the Tech Accord. And the Tech Accord does a couple of things. Firstly, is it provides services for MEPs or for anybody going to an election as a candidate to be able to use a service called Content Credentials as a Service to be able to make sure that they are watermarking. They can put a credential in the file that they create about their own images. And so therefore people will be able to identify whether those are genuine or whether they're not. We'll also be working very closely as we go through to the European elections, particularly because that's such an important moment, to also open up the opportunity for people to be able to report in and to ask whether a particular image is a deep fake or whether it's not. And part of that is also to then protect the electoral system. And so the opportunity for people, and we'll be working with the party infrastructure across Europe to support them as they implement technology as part of their campaigns to make sure that they're able to identify and to be able to use technology in ways to combat the use of deepfakes. And the really important part, I think, is this emphasis on using credentials and being able to use, again, there's a watermarking standard that's been developed across the industry, which really enables the ability to identify and to watermark content with greater precision. It's not going to solve, again, the problem itself, but it will provide us with, I think, a very important tool as we head into this very important period.
Would you like to make a comment before my question?
Yeah, so this is obviously an active research area, how to solve this problem. Obviously, it's easier to create an infrastructure that can provide certificates about something somebody has said. It's harder to prove that somebody has not said something, you know what I mean? Like, I can bless everything that I want to bless, but then, how do I prove that I didn't say something, right? So, so it's an active area, but of course, I think it's thinking about deep fakes brought us in front of a big issue that has actually existed since the beginning of the internet, but now it's becoming more and more intense. And I think it's important to think about it. On the flip side, we can also use AI to improve access to public resources, and that can, on a different line of thinking, can actually help democracy, right? So that AI can be used for a more inclusive, governance. And of course, we have to deal with all the issues that are around deep fakes that are becoming obviously very prominent.
And I might just comment just quickly that I think one of the lessons we're learning from the elections that have taken place is exactly the positive ways to build social awareness campaigns and to be able to use the technology to make that much more accessible across populations. So I think it's really important that the broader awareness of these sorts of issues in the community and the technology, I think, can really help accelerate that.
AI AI can help democracy and can support institutions, but when it comes to Greece, are the institutions ready to welcome AI?
What can I say?
No comment.
I'm going to make a comment. So, when I accepted my role as the head of the AI committee, I wouldn't do that if I thought that we're not mature for massive, like moving the needle in this space. I think that adapting to this new era is of sovereign importance for Greece as well as other states. It's a development that we just cannot miss. So, I have good faith that we are mature to implement change. I think we all have to be educated because what's important here is participation. When you have a new industrial revolution, you cannot be left behind. So, to not be left behind, you have to be literate. So we have to work to gain that understanding of the tech, right? And of course, there are different levels of understanding, right? Depending on what usage you wanna make of the technology. You also need understanding because you want to govern it. You want to participate in setting the frameworks for the usage of this technology. So I think we all have to become more mature. I think we are mature, and it's an opportunity to leapfrog into a new state for our country.
So, in contrast to the other technologies, AI is immediately accessible to those with internet access. We mean 5 billion people. Does this pose a risk for the way such a new technology will be used? And if so, can we regulate it in some way?
I think that the importance of recognizing that the technology has to benefit broadly. And I think one of the things that's been very encouraging when you look at the global stage and you're looking at the adoption and the regulation of AI, is that I think you're seeing the interest in governments, and I think the government in Greece, and I think the national approach to AI here is along those lines, is very much thinking about how do you provide the technology on an inclusive basis. And I think that's both within countries. And so I think looking at how you build skills and how you build training capacity. And we've had, I think a number of very productive meetings here. And in fact, one of the things that excites us about the investments that we're making in Greece is the approach and the holistic approach that's being taken to thinking about how to build up that capability. There's work to do, but there's certainly interest and focus about how to build up that capability within the country. And then I think when you look at it more broadly, you are seeing governments worldwide recognizing that this can't be a technology which exists only for the developed countries. It is a technology that really needs to be made available, in some senses, to assist countries to make that leap and to not have to go through the legacy steps that other countries have gone down.
Yeah, I guess let me add to it that it's not just access to the internet, obviously, right? So there is access to compute. It's also access to models that are built on data that is on the internet, as well as data that is proprietary data belonging to states, organizations, companies. And for this reason, I mean, like when you think about the whole, the whole pipeline that it takes to create those models and using those models, you have to think hard about who should benefit from the value that data creates, as well as the value that all the scientific progress that enable these, breakthroughs. Right, I mean, like what happened is, like scientific breakthroughs in universities, as well as data that has been recorded since the beginning of the internet or before that, are put together to create powerful models. But we are in a state where, like a lot of these models are closed up in companies that are well-funded, and academia at this point cannot compete because it became a compute-hungry sport to train those models. So what we have to think hard about is how do we make this progress that will benefit, obviously, like there's huge opportunity to benefit humanity. How do we make it available in a democratic way, right? Because, like reaping the benefits cannot be, you know what I mean? Like we cannot reap those benefits created by scientific progress and data. We all have to reap those benefits. So what is that framework that will allow diffusion of that value across, the population?
Yeah, and I think we've been having a number of discussions about this because I think we place great importance on the fact is that the technology will be at most benefit to, frankly, business, but then the broader society, if there's in fact broader access. And broader access exactly as Kostas talks about in terms of access to compute, access to data, and access for the ability for all sizes of business to be able to innovate and to leverage the technology. We recently announced a set of access principles from a Microsoft perspective that really identify the ways in which we're going to approach ensuring that model developers of any size are able to leverage our technology and the compute aspect of it, and also to make sure that there are no restrictive conditions then in how that they can then monetize and build their own businesses around that, and so that there's no, we have commitments around not using data from different models to train our own model. That's something that should belong to the organisation, that whatever size they are, that chooses to do that. So I think working on these principles and then having that discussion, because it's again not just something that we can do, it's something that we need to agree across the ecosystem to be effective. But I think that's a really important way to make sure that we're continuing to see the sort of broad-based benefit that flows from the technology.
2 days ago, I was reading about the EU Youth Summit in Brussels, which is practically the simulation of the summit of the EU leaders. Can you guess what was the discussion about? Regulating AI. So I couldn't help thinking that this is a typical mode, the typical EU approach. Take time, talk, protect and regulate. While US and China are making progress and they are leading the way in a fast way. So do you find this type of balance between leading players effective?
Yeah, I think regulation is very important. You know what I mean? Like, regulation is good because it provides the framework within which you can operate. If things are uncertain, there is risk going forward. So I think, I like the idea that EU has been proactive to create that framework. And what we're thinking as committee is how to be flexible about how we think about the opportunities offered by this tech. Something that's important to remember is that tech is not monolithic, right? So for example, there are ways to access data without, when it comes, for example, to protecting privacy in the data. You can take the very conservative approach that, you either have access to data or you don't have access to data. That's very monolithic because then there is tech that allows you to get utility of the data without divulging the privacy of anybody. So we need to be flexible about how we interpret the basic principles and the regulation that is created. And I think it can be an advantage to have a framework within which to operate. And of course, when it comes to China, I mean, that's a different kind of question, right? I mean, but US I think will develop regulation soon. Perhaps. You probably know better the US landscape.
Yeah, and I mean, I completely agree. I think the EU has taken what we see as directionally the absolute right approach in using a risk-based approach that is outcomes focused, and I think that's important to then try and get this balance between innovation and regulation. And we've been supporters of the notion that we need to have regulation in this space because. For the reasons Costa says, I think it creates the framework that does, I think, two important things. One, it encourages and builds confidence in the ability to invest, and it engenders trust. And, when you're looking at this technology, one of the most common things that I see when I talk with, constituents in lots of markets is people are concerned. They are concerned about what the technology may or may not be able to do. And so the assurance that can come from government providing appropriate regulation. And then I think to get to what you think of as appropriate regulation, I do think this very healthy dialogue, which frankly the EU has done, we're seeing in the US at the moment, and we're seeing in a number of countries, between private sector and the government, because government has a responsibility to its citizens, and that it needs to be recognised and respected. And the tech companies can help inform where the technology limits are and what the technology capabilities are. And then hopefully we get to some medium. It may not be everybody's agreeable on every aspect of it, but we get to a medium where we create the trust, we create the certainty, and we stimulate the innovation to then unleash the opportunity and benefit.
I guess let me add also this, that regulating AI is a unique problem because, as I was saying earlier, tech is malleable. It's not monolithic. It's not something that is already been done, and we can predict what character it'll have, 2 years down the road. And it's a unique problem how to regulate that tech. And for this reason, we have to acknowledge that and create regulation that doesn't have to always catch up with technological developments, but is perhaps principle-based, for exactly the reason that we have been talking about. With uncertainty about what the framework is, you can have innovation, you can have business innovation. So you have to have a framework that is adaptable, that can give you predictive power about what's allowed to do and what is not allowed to do. You should avoid doing.
Who else should be involved in the discussion regarding the EU regulation?
Yeah.
Both. The floor is yours.
No, look, we've talked about it, I think, already. I think, for a tech that's going to influence everybody's life, we all have to participate in regulating it. AI can provide tools to aggregate, our thinking about, the framework of usage of this tech. We can think about, direct democracy approaches into how to accomplish that. These fora are also important for thinking about these aspects. But yeah, ultimately, when it comes to something major like that, we all have to participate in what we want to allow.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say, look, the interesting thing, and I think Costa's is unique technology, and one of the things that I think is fundamental is it touches upon human agency. And when it touches upon human agency, I then think asks some very fundamental, and I think Greece is certainly being very thoughtful about how to incorporate this ethical notion into the way that the technology and regulation of the technology should exist. And I think that therefore requires, you don't want tech companies, you don't want just technologists inputting or deciding or working with government in relation to the regulation. You need ethicists, you need people who come from a philosophical background, because these are important questions for societies to be deciding upon as they look to put the guardrails around the technology. And so I do think that having this multi-stakeholder approach of bringing in academia, of having civil society, of having government, and having the technology companies themselves, we'll get to a much better solutions that I think address the sort of the more core issues that we're concerned about by bringing those stakeholders together.
Yeah, that's a super important point. We don't want, a techno-optimist utopia, guiding how this is all going to play out.
Yeah.
Allow me one last question for both of you. Having used AI in the last 6 months, what is the most exciting thing you have experienced, or a weird request?
I can start.
Please do.
So I'm a scientist, so I like breaking things. So what I do with AI tech is to break it. And I can talk about the pain points and what I think is frontier research that needs to be developed. So of course, like if you look at the past decade and what developments have taken place, AI has conquered different data modalities, right? So starting with images and speech, to molecules and like understanding proteins and like their behavior, and then like more recently natural language and doing things with language models, right? So we have conquered a bunch of data modalities, and we have developed tools to make predictions. So given some task, we can ask a model to solve, to give us an answer or to make a prediction. What we have not done yet is to, we don't know how to put these things together. And coming back to the agency question, when you think about ML, machine learning and AI, at some point you're going to give it agency. It's going to, my AI agent is going to be interacting with your agent, right? And current models are not robust to this kind of thing, right? So AI models are not robust to being exploited by humans. So there's, a lot of literature on attacks on models. AI models are not robust in interacting, like with humans, even non-adversarial humans, or with, other AIs, right? So like self-driving cars, if you've ever driven in San Francisco, you probably have this experience. AI models are not, like controlling cars, self-driving cars, are not good at interaction with human drivers, right? So when we're thinking about a future where all these models are going to be widely deployed, a piece of the puzzle that we're missing is how to give agency to these things and make them robust to that interaction. That is a problem we have not solved. When sort of like we're already reaching the saturation point of what we can do with models that just make predictions. I think we're gonna, and as this technology is being more widely deployed, we're gonna be thinking more hard about the agency aspect of that tech and the multi-agency aspect of that tech. So I'm working on that. That's advertising my own research. As you know, I've worked a lot in game theory as well, and of course this is relevant here. But that's how, like, breaking things and thinking about what we're missing.
And I just realised my life is a lot more boring. so I'll give you two quick.
That makes two of us.
I'll give you two quick examples. One of great utility to me because I am still stuck in a world of far too much email, and so when I can have my co-pilot technology draft me email responses, that has fundamentally changed the way that I then have to deal with my inbox. And then I'll leave you with one moment of inspiration, because I think this is when, for me, I really felt like, wow, this is going to change. I was actually in India, and I was outside of the city, not a long way outside of the city in Delhi, and there was a local farmer who was illiterate and who spoke a local dialect, and they were demonstrating an application where he could use his mobile phone, he could talk in his local dialect to request a government service. The government service effectively translated his local dialect into, they were using English. They translated it into English, extracted the support that he could get from the government, and then delivered that back to him and told him what he needed to do in his local dialect. And you realise that the opportunity to solve and address the accessibility, inclusion, and some of the really big issues that we have ahead of us, it's very exciting.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for being here. Have a nice afternoon.